I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the next reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Rush is over. That race should never have gone ahead. All right, Andy, here we go. Talking about some real guys now. Real guys in F1.
Yes.
James Hunt, Niki Lauda. Some of the greats in F1 history. And one of them was on fire.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Well, and this was interesting because we've seen car wrecks in the films so far that we've been talking about. Like every film, I think, has so far featured an accident in some sort or another, some more deadly than others. I don't think we've had something really kind of hit to this point where it actually like explodes, they're on fire and everything. And I thought it was interesting because, you know, we through the announcer's expository bit that we had in Le Mans, like we hear them talking about how these people have to even wear fireproof underwear, like they're wearing like full fireproof suits because that have to withstand 8,000 degree temperatures or whatever it is for X amount of time because of the likelihood of bursting into flames, which we see here, and we see how awful that situation can actually be and difficult when you've got a huge track. And how long does it take the emergency vehicle and the fire extinguishers to actually get to that point in the track where the accident is in order to put out the fire so that they can actually rescue the person?
So we've talked about some movies that you didn't care for as much, some in our driving series so far.
Le Mans, certainly not.
Yes, that was a rough one. Both of the movies that we've talked about have had their strengths when it comes to looking at driving. Le Mans it was a experiential film. It was very much about the experience of being at Le Mans, driving Le Mans, and not actually speaking or having any sort of what do they call it, story. And Grand Prix is very much sort of exemplary racing experience. And Frankenheimer doesn't care for women. Let's just leave it at that. There's not a great story on the other side of the racing. How did this one hit you? Ron Howard, modern take on racing, slightly more in terms of modern racing movie techniques, even though it's telling a period story. What'd you think?
Well, again, it's the first actual, like, based on a true story. I mean, the other ones have featured real racers in real races and all of that, but this is the, first one where we're actually recreating a historical period to tell a story about particular characters at a point in time. The other two also were present day of their eras, 66 and 71. So here we are in 2013 telling a story that took place in 1976. And I mean, it definitely felt like a Ron Howard biopic. It felt pretty safe. It felt, honestly, I enjoy the character work by the two actors. Like, I thought they did a great job portraying these two characters and the rivalry and the different ways that they acted and reacted toward each other and everything. I was a little disappointed by the actual race footage. I mean, honestly, it's a modern film, and so I think that he moves through the races, like the entire series of the F1 season, pretty fluidly. Like, you've got some great ways to kind of edit these stories together or edit these races together where you're getting little glimpses of one and you're getting text on the screen to talk about, Landa won or Hunt won or whatever the case may be. And you're kind of getting this sense of the scope of the entire season, as opposed to, like, you kind of get that in Grand Prix a little bit, where you're focused on a race and then you go to another race and then they talk about a race. Like, you kind of get it. But here it's like you actually have some modern storytelling in the way that you move through the races, and you get I guess for me, I had a pretty good sense of the way that it all worked, and maybe it's because I'd already seen Grand Prix and I had already a sense of how the Formula One Grand Prix system operated. But so I think that they do a pretty good job with that. But it's hard to say that this was really designed to be a racing film where you watch for, the excitement and the creativity done on the racetrack.
Yeah, I found myself frustrated with this movie. I agree with everything you said, which is I think Howard does a good job of demonstrating the sport of F1, right? The way that, like you said, the way we move through a season, the way we move through different locations, how that works. There were a couple of things that frustrated me, and I'm going to start with the filmmaking part. I think because it's a modern movie, what we get is a sort of Michael Bay approach to the flash of the cars, and it is deeply distracting for me the way he shot those cars. It was just sexed up distraction of motor vehicles. And I don't think it adequately conveyed the kind of sort of terror rush that comes from being in the car. I don't think it did as good a job of the last two movies of demonstrating the car, because it just felt too much, too Michael Bay. And I kept thinking back to Apollo 13, right? What was it about Apollo 13 that I think Ron Howard did very, very well as a filmmaker that was just lost in rush? I was so distracted. There was nothing in it that felt grounded cinematically. Like there was nothing in it that felt like it was giving me a taste of reality. It was just all heightened. And I never once felt like I was able to understand the emotional reality of where we were. I think voiceovers, when you talk about a voiceover and why I hate voiceover, this movie is case example number one. I hated the voiceovers in this movie. They made me viscerally angry at what I was watching. I just wanted them to shut up and show me. Shut up and show me. And that was incredibly distracting. So those choices are Howard choices and script choices. And they don't impact for me the performances, because I do think while I have some issues with the performances, it's not because of how these two guys delivered them. It's because I am more aware as a fan of F1, what the relationships of the drivers are, and this movie didn't really capture what those things were for me as a fan. And so that was frustrating, but for a different reason. I think that both the guys did really great. And, our pre-show chat for members, we talked about, insane teeth in film. And what's so interesting about Daniel Brühl, his performance as Niki Lauda is spot on. And actually, like if you look at Lauda in this era, like the post-Wreck era, Daniel Brühl is a spitting image of the guy. The spitting image. It's really incredible. And so hats off to makeup that actually created that, to the teeth, to the ear, the face, everything. I mean, I think Daniel Brühl really carried it. So, it's a hit and miss movie. And unfortunately for me, it misses in many of the areas that are most important to me as a racing fan.
Well, let's talk about the racing first, and then we can talk more about like the characters and kind of the rest of it. But I just think as far as the racing goes, it stood out to me that Howard was trying to find ways to do some creative work on the track. Like there were a lot of shots that he captured that were essentially like extreme close-ups, and often like on the ground, like next to blades of grass that are just next to the track, right? Mm-hmm. Things like that, where you're looking at something extreme close-up of the world around the track, the space that the track is in. and you kind of see that shot of these blades of grass here as the cars go zipping past at incredibly high speeds. And that happens a number of times that it just made me think about, okay, what is he trying to say here? Is he trying to show us, like, give us a sense of how it fits into the world? Like, I couldn't figure out why those particular shots were kind of so featured, other than he's just trying to play with the camera and come up with unique angles. Like, is there more to it? Or is it that basic of a reason to kind of shoot things that way?
I mean, to me, it felt like this was Ron Howard's MTV era. Like, what can I do to hyper saturate the lighting, to give us slow motion and extreme close-ups and blades of grass, all to make a music video, right? I'm just making a music video right now.
Do you remember any other shots in races that stood out? And I guess to that end, as far as like how the races went themselves, were they easy to understand? Because I mean, I will say that's something that he did do well, is like, it was pretty easy for me to figure out like the way that they put the editing of the races together as far as who's in the lead and all of that. Like, whereas Le Mans and sometimes in Grand Prix, it's like, I know there are people out there who are racing, but I can't tell who's in which car or anything. And I think that somehow they made this one feel like, okay, I'm following this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's hit and miss with that too, right? I think he does a fair job in some of the tracks. In other tracks, he's doing things like restructuring the way the track works. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, the way the thing is cut together, this is the thing about F1, like, every season you go to some of the same tracks over and over and over again. And if you watch these races every season, you as a fan get to sort of memorize the tracks, and you expect certain turns at certain places. And Howard just erases some of that, right, in some of the biggest sequences in the film. So you can't watch this and reconstruct it as if it was a real race. That is not the case with the other two movies. I think the other two movies actually do it very well to the period, where you actually can watch the thing and feel like you're at a race. It's hard to do that with Rush.
Well, but, and I suppose this is a question about like how things like this work in the world of film, because again, we've talked about Bullet on our show, and that was like, you can't recreate the car chase in Bullet on the streets of San Francisco, because the roads that he's on don't lead to the other roads that happen to be in the next shot. Like, it doesn't play out that way. And so does that matter more in the world of a car race? Because it didn't matter to me. I don't know these tracks, for anything. And so, like, I just had an understanding of how the race was actually going. I don't think it ever bothered me. Just like, I've lived in San Francisco, and I don't really care that the streets don't match up in those races. But I guess maybe for race fans, this might be a line that is a harder thing to cross.
Well, the problem is, as a race fan, you watch this movie and you think, oh, I get it. Ron Howard did not make this movie for me. That's okay. That's okay.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
He made this movie for the MTV like lulz of making an exciting music video. That's fine. I can move past that. But what that also says is, once we're on the track, I lose that sense of emotional connection to these guys in a way that is not wholly satisfying. It's so much more about mood than motorsport at this point, this movie.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, because it's a biopic. We're watching a biographical story about a particular racing season that stands out because of this rivalry that was on display between Hunt and Lauda over the course of the season. But I wonder if that, like, what matters the most in portraying a rivalry like that in the film? Is it the racing, or is it the material off the track, or is it all of it?
Well, this is the this is the problem with all of these movies that we've talked about. When you go into the subject area and you know something about it, it can be very frustrating when that is dismissed for the purposes of cinema. When you don't know anything about it, it just seems great and dramatic. I would say that the dismissing the racing parts is as important as what they did to the relationship between Hunt and Lauda, who by all reports were collegial off the track. This was not an off-track rivalry that the movie needed to amp up to make more than it was, right? They were intensely combative on the track, but off the track, they were like all the other drivers. And that's part of the mystery of F1 to me, is how these guys, I think they did the same thing in Grand Prix, that how these guys are able to continue to maintain a relationship off the track that is so wildly different than on the track, since they're racing each other every single race, right? It's the same people. And I think that's part of the magic of F1. And I think Howard, for the interests of making making the movie, made a movie and took a lot of shortcuts.
Well, and that's, going to the story of the actual characters. I think that's something that frustrated me the most when I learned about it, is how much they actually ended up fictionalizing this rivalry between these characters. And Ron Howard obviously chose to make the movie with the script as it was, but Peter Morgan wrote the script and I don't know, chose to amplify. Like maybe he didn't feel that this rivalry was strong enough to actually carry the film and wanted it to actually seem bigger. And so seemed to use Landa's character as kind of like a way, like his personality as a way to force this rivalry to be even bigger. And maybe he was as much of a jerk as he's portrayed off the track with everybody. Like maybe that's just kind of his character. But the fact that like at one point they had shared a flat together, they were good friends. Right. And as you said, it's like all of this isn't portrayed in this film. Like they are portrayed essentially as rivals off the track and on the track. And it just doesn't sound like that was reality. And so, and I know biopics or any script, you're always going to be making changes to a true life story to enhance it and to bring out different elements. And, we talked about Social Network early on in our show. And obviously there were a lot of changes made to that story as far as kind of what type of person Zuckerberg was. And, so, it's the writer's, ability to kind of like craft a story that you can still kind of buy in some sense. And I don't know, I guess I just felt like there had to be a better way to kind of explain that these two could still get along fine off the track, but it really was that rivalry on the track that makes this thing thrive. And so it just seemed so forced when I learned that they really had to come up with all of these off the track, attitudes and arguments and things to kind of like make a film.
Right. And here, I think you just said it, why it's so frustrating, because, making the choice to simplify their relationship into just rivalry is a choice that actually undersells the radical complexity of their relationship as men and as competitors and as colleagues. The fact that off the track they could have this relationship that was good actually amplifies the experience post-accident of how they're able to resolve the guilt and the shame that Hunt undoubtedly felt at being a party to this, watching his off-track friend deal with such on-track trauma. I think that is a a really interesting experience, but just minimizing it to the absolute base of men fight, men race, men on fire, it does a disservice to that legacy, and that's frustrating to me. Was Lauda a jerk? People say, like, there are reports that he was a jerk. I think what really existed was he was incredibly peculiar and precise, and had very high expectations of everyone that worked with him and around him, and that if you did not understand that, it made him come off like a jerk. But actually, he was demanding. He was incredibly demanding, and that was the sort of trade-off. But it's not like the man never smiled. Like, he was such a caricature of all of the things that people said about him, and not really, it didn't really feel like who he is if you kind of dive into more robust reporting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that Brühl actually gives a nice performance of the character. Like I said, I enjoy him and Hemsworth as these two characters, and I think they portray them in a way that I can buy these characters. It's just it was kind of disappointing to learn that they kind of had to come up with this whole, fake thing to kind of make it actually play in a cinematic way.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's interesting because like Niki Lauda's still alive, or was at the time that they made the film, and so perhaps they were able to get more of a perspective from him. And James Hunt, he died not, like, I don't know, within 10-ish years after all of this happened. Like, he didn't go on too much longer after this. Died at the age of 45, and so is it more Lauda's perspective than Hunt's? And that goes to another problem I had with this film, is I felt like Peter Morgan, putting it together, couldn't figure out who he felt like the protagonist was. Is it Lauda? Is it Hunt? I don't feel like he knew. I feel like he had a hard time deciding. And so, and it's not like any film with a rivalry, whether it's like a romantic rivalry, like, that's kind of the nature of these characters, is you get to know both characters and then you see how they come together. And so it's good that we're learning so much about both of these characters, but I just kept feeling like, especially because we have like the voiceover from Daniel Brühl early in the film, and then we go over to James Hunt and we're getting his voiceover now. And I'm like, well, okay, so is it, whose story, like who's our storyteller? Who are we kind of latching onto here? And I just felt like he never was quite sure. And I think that's an issue with it that I had, because it felt like in the end, it was supposed to be Lauda's story.
Yeah.
It felt like he's supposed to be our protagonist. He's the character we should be following. But then you get to award season, and they clearly didn't think so, because it was a supporting actor that he was predominantly nominated for, which we'll talk about when we get to that point. But it was just weird. It's like, how, like, is it only because it's Chris Hemsworth versus Daniel Brühl? I don't know. But I struggled with that, and that made it harder for me to ever really connect with the characters who are like the heart of the story. They're carrying this thing.
Absolutely. I think that is a central failing of the movie, is its lack of commitment to the principal character in this thing, and that's Niki Lauda. This is the Niki Lauda story. That would have been a fantastic story with James Hunt and other drivers moving in and out of that relationship, right? Like, this thing is about a guy who was incredibly, horrifically injured and came back. That's what more of a hero story do we need? And I don't think they figured that out in time.
Yeah, and not just came back that same season. Like,
yes,
like a month later or something. Like,
right.
It's crazy how he was so driven. And I mean, I liked the way they portrayed, like, his drive partially is pushed because he's watching Hunt winning all of these other races. And so he's just like, he's kind of furious, and it's just like, I have to get back in there because I can't let this man win. And I liked all of that. But again, it's just because, as you said, it should feel like the Niki Lauda story, but it doesn't always. And I think that makes it hard to ever feel like he's who we're following completely.
Yeah. Right.
So
did you get any sense of the of the actual strategy or the team makeup of these things? Like, could you tell me without looking who Lauda and Hunt were driving for? Like, what team did they represent?
Well, yeah. Well, I knew that Hunt was driving for McLaren because they kind of make a deal about that, about as he's trying to find the team, and Lauda's driving for Ferrari because we have that whole thing where he goes and sits with the guys and does the little press thing where, So I mean, there are a few times like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's good. I think it's important because I think one of the grand criticisms, which I share of this movie, is that they do not give us, again, because they made the choices, the economic, like narrative economy, choices of narrative economy around picking the rivalry over anything else, is you don't get a sense of the team makeup and the fact that there was really some other interesting dynamics going on that season, from Andretti to Tyrrell to Lotus. Like, there were some great teams, and they were really doing some interesting things in this season, and it was just all shoved aside because sometimes that strategy, it's such a part of F1. And I read a review this morning that was like, Ron Howard, as an American coming into an F1 story, made a NASCAR movie and didn't know it. And NASCAR and F1 are very different. Very, very different. And that's a thing that, maybe maybe you don't know, but it's frustrating for fans. And I think that's why it didn't get quite the fan nods that other movies that treat their stories with greater sort of respect get.
Well, and you say all that, and as not a racing fan, like, I don't even know what that means when you say that. Like, I'm just like, okay, NASCAR versus Grand Prix, sure, okay. Yeah, it's all car racing to me. I wouldn't know the difference. But I will say, to your point, like, I know there are other racers. I mean, other people have lines, like in the scene when Lauda's trying to get them to not race because the track is too wet. Like, there are other racers who are popping up and speaking and things like that. Like, I know there are people, but like, I don't know who any of them are. Like, I know that they mention a few other racers here and there, but it's never, ever the focus. And I just have to think that Howard decided, and maybe Morgan decided in his script, we have to focus on these two characters. It's all about them. The other characters are all just, part of the background of this story. And it's not as important to focus on any of them or any other rivalries or anything else because it doesn't relate to what we're trying to tell here in this rivalry between Lauda and Hunt.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the cost of the movie we got.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that boils down to, like, is it a story depicting the racing season from 1976, or is it just a story about the rivalry between these two characters? And they chose the latter. It's not a story about the racing season of 1976. Like, we never really, like, I don't think, like you mentioned those other names, like, I don't think if they were actual characters ever in the film, I don't think I'd be able to tell you who they were or where they popped up.
Well, we sure got Clay Regazzoni, the other Ferrari driver, right?
Yeah,
we
yeah,
got him.
Right. We saw.
I think we had a Jody Scheckter. These were all like Jody Scheckter was on the podium with them whenever there were podium shots. Never had a line, but was in the championship standing, finished third. Like, was the other guy to beat constantly. Yeah. And never really got a call out. So
yeah, because it wasn't his story. Like, he's not part of the rivalry between these two specific
those two guys. But he was in reality, right? Like, that's the thing. He was in reality, and I think
what was his name again?
Jody Scheckter.
Jody Scheckter. Okay, is it like SCHE?
It is SCHECKTER.
Yeah, I mean, but it's interesting because, like, the Hunt Lauda rivalry, like, it has its own Wikipedia page. Yeah. Scheckter is also not even mentioned on that. So in the scope of what they call the rivalry, it's just those two characters.
It's those two
guys. Again, that's what they just chose to focus on. These two characters, no one else matters. Other than their love interests, which we do have in this film. And it's worth talking about because that was kind of a key element. I mean, we've had women in the lives of all of our characters so far in the films. We have Olivia Wilde as Susie Miller, and then we have Alexandra Maria Lara as Marlene Knaus Lauda, who becomes Niki's wife. How did those stories work for you?
No. You have to do this because I'm the one who gets angry at the racing. You're the one who has to comment on the relationships with the women.
I actually didn't mind it here. I liked it. I thought that they played pretty well. I actually enjoyed the way that Niki Lauda meets Marlene and like the way that relationship develops. It's a very interesting depiction when they're kind of falling in love. He like the way that he spells out what the realities are like for being with a guy like him. All of that was actually, I liked that as that love story. It was really interesting. It played well. And what I love so much about it, as somebody who is so fervent about his love of the race and his scientific knowledge about how to make things work, he actually has that moment. And this is after he's crashed and been burned and come back. And he has that moment when he's racing where it's getting wet and he kind of has a moment where he's just like, there's a visual flash of her face. And we realize that, he is finally realizing that he cares more about her at this particular point and wants to live. And so he stops and quits the race and goes off with his wife. And I thought that was actually a very interesting kind of journey for that character.
What's interesting is that moment, I think, represents his entire methodology around driving and risk better than any other, right? The fact that we had to wait so long in the movie to get it is an interesting question, why, but also not that interesting because, of course, it has to be the last-minute decision for dramatic purposes. But he was so pragmatic, and I think that moment was done in a way that humanized him so far beyond his otherwise, robotic portrayal in the script that I really loved it. I genuinely loved it when he dropped out of that race. I think that was the right way to handle the filmmaking of that bit.
Well, and it speaks to like this is a person who recognizes the realities of this world and as violent and brutal as it can be, realizes like I've already gone through this once. I tried to get them to stop the race. They wouldn't. Here we are in the same situation. We shouldn't be racing. I'm going to stop because it's dumb. We should not be out here in a potentially suicidal situation where people are going to die. Yeah, pretty interesting.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. And then we have Olivia Wilde, who is a kind of an interesting character. She is Niki's wife who isn't necessarily they're kind of, I mean, he's a party animal. He only really wanted to marry just to say that he got married. Like he's kind of that sort of guy and can't really settle down. And she recognizes that and she's traveling a lot too. And so of course she ends up off with Richard Burton, which I thought was an interesting little twist. And did you read that
funny.
They actually had intended to shoot a scene where Richard Burton confronted him?
I did not catch that bit. That's great.
And it would have been Russell Crowe playing Richard Burton. I thought that was kind of interesting. That would have been kind of a fun scene to see.
Do you know what? Whatever you think of Russell Crowe, he could pull the Richard Burton. Like an angry, drunk Richard Burton. Yeah. That's Russell Crowe. We just found it.
Yeah.
And I just want to correct. I think you said Nikki. She was Niki's wife. She was James'
Oh, sorry.
wife.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing we know about this series, I'm calling everyone the wrong name. So.
I think I didn't care for the casting of Olivia Wilde in this part. I didn't care for it. I didn't feel any sort of natural chemistry between the two. And I think if anything, especially in the beginning of their relationship, there was chemistry. And I don't think she pulled it off with Chris. And I am a fan of Olivia Wilde and her work. It just didn't fit for me.
I guess it didn't have as much of an issue because she ends up leaving the picture not too long after they've already gotten married and everything. And so it didn't end up being too much of a problem for me. It just felt like another kind of free spirit person, and she kind of says to him, like, you never really were here for getting married, and but maybe she wasn't either. Maybe she's just as much that free spirit who just wants to kind of like go out and party and explore and whatever.
Right
Yeah. Any other characters? I mean, there's not really a lot. It's really just such a focus on these particular key characters.
Yeah. I think the movie, it's as big as the movie purports to be. It's actually a pretty small movie. It's a small movie in terms of where the lens is pointed for us, and it's exciting. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on, and I think if you can let the popcorn do the talking, it's a good couple hours, but it's not a terrific racing movie.
Well, yeah, but even as far as like a character film where we're kind of learning about these two characters, I mean, it does give us a sense of the rivalry, but again, it's kind of falsifying bits and pieces of that, and I just don't know. I don't know, in the scope of that sort of thing, I just don't find it really as interesting or engaging. And maybe it really wasn't that interesting and engaging to begin with. And they were trying to find a way to make it more interesting and engaging, and they didn't. And so it ends up being, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting to now know that there was a rivalry in this particular season, but and awful to, see what had actually happened to Lauda. But, it just wasn't overly exciting.
I think there's room for continued exploration of Lauda's comeback. I think that month is fascinating to me. And this movie, I think, got distracted by Chris Hemsworth.
So you think that they should make a Lauda film that isn't necessarily focused on the rivalry, but just really on the recovery and coming back?
Well, I don't think you can tell a Lauda story without the rivalry, but I think the movie, I stand by that comment. I think the movie got distracted by the James Hunt parts, which are vastly less interesting and less compelling than the Lauda stuff. He's a secondary motivating character and surely doesn't deserve his own voiceover. He doesn't deserve hero moments. So many hero moments in this movie, Andy. So many hero shots of people putting on helmets and taking off helmets in silhouette. I mean, it was just egregious hero moments. So,
in the, it was interesting to kind of like, I know it's through voiceover at the end, but it was interesting to kind of like have that moment where they bump into each other again. And you get Lauda's voiceover as he's talking about how that was it for Hunt. Like Hunt won the one time, as if he just needed to prove that he could do it, and then just didn't really seem to get motivated. And learning about how he ran out of money, fell into alcohol addiction, and that story that he talks about, that Lauda talks about, how he ran into him on a bicycle with a flat tire. That's where he was at that particular point. And Lauda actually gave him some money, and Hunt ended up rebuilding his life, got it back on track. And that's how he ended up cleaning himself up and actually becoming a TV broadcaster. And I think that's really interesting. And the fact that they don't really like talk about any of that is kind of like surprising.
It's an important coda in their relationship, right? But once you decide that this whole thing is about antagonism between these two guys and not the collegiality between these two guys, you can't really showcase that kind of an element at the end because it doesn't serve the story.
Yeah,
I mean, he won by a single point in Japan. A single point. He was a great driver. He wasn't the greatest driver.
Yeah, and I will say that's something I still haven't learned from any of these movies is the point system. And I don't know if it matters to me, like as an audience, to really understand, like, how is it just 1 point per place in the race. Like, I don't understand how any of that works or makes sense. And when they say that at the end, like he ended up winning by 1 point, I'm like, okay, I don't know how that happened, but okay, 1 point. Like, it's just one of those things that I kind of have to shrug off because I'm just like, they were close. You know,
they don't. None of the movies have really done a great job of that. And the way the point system works is you know, it's not really complicated, but it is obscure because you know where you come in, you know, where you finish gives you a certain number of points. Anything below a certain point in the standings gets no points. So they use the term like, oh, he's in the points, meaning he got some points for himself and for the team, and then he's not in the points means he's usually below the top 10 and didn't get any points. He raced for nothing. It just cost him money to race. So these guys in that top 10 places, or you know, in the 76th season, I don't know, top 8 places or something, they got points. But it's a different, like for your first you get a whole bunch of points, second you get fewer points. It's not just 1 point for a win.
Okay.
So
well, and then in the scope of, you know, even the Niki Lauda story, it really isn't. Again, just proving that it really is focused on the rivalry, because like we get a note at the end that I think he'd go on and do more racing and win and stuff like that. But it's just like, that's not the focus. Like anything after that exchange at the airport, like just is kind of dismissed as voiceover, not super important. And I mean, I will say it was nice to actually see some real footage of these guys at the end of some of those moments. So at least you could get a sense of it. But
neat transitions otherwise it's like, too. For sure.
Yeah, you're just not really getting a sense of anything that happens after this.
Yeah. So frustrating, bombastic movie that does, I think, a disservice to the actual history. And I'm sorry for that, Ron Howard.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we have anything else to say. Do we? Any other points? Any other thoughts?
I'm good.
All right. Well, we will be right back. But first, our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. Music by Duff Music, Ty Simon. Custom melody, Oriole Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at d-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.
All right, this is me, right?
Assuming we do an ad for you this week, I guess. I guess it is.
It only makes it easier when I edit it. So, all right, here we go. There's this Letterboxd user, that one, who always seems to be one step ahead of me. I'll log a 1930s German expressionist film like M or The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari thinking I'm being all sophisticated, only to find out they've already reviewed it and left a bunch of insightful comments. And don't even get me started on their obscure Japanese new wave picks like Eros and Massacre or Funeral Parade of Roses. I mean, I thought I was doing pretty well with my movie watching this year. I've already hit 1,000 hours or so, and we're barely halfway through 2024 or through 2025. But then I made the mistake of checking their stats, and they're already at a whopping 1,500 hours. How is that even possible? Do they not sleep? And it's not just the quantity. Their reviews are always so well written and thought-provoking. They've got this one review of 8.5 that has over like 1,000 likes and hundreds of comments. Meanwhile, I'm over here struggling to get even a dozen likes on my most popular review. But you know what? Having this rival on Letterboxd has actually been a great motivator. Every time I see they've watched some new Iranian new wave film or left a brilliant review, it pushes me to up my own game. I find myself seeking out more challenging and diverse films and really putting effort into crafting my reviews and engaging with the community. And the crazy thing is, I think they might be feeling the same way. We've started having these back and forth conversations in the comments of each other's reviews and other people's, recommending films and debating interpretations. It's like we're developing this weird sort of mutual respect, even as we continue to try to one up each other. That's the magic of Letterboxd, though. It has a way of connecting people through their love of film, even if they start out as rivals. And with so many incredible movies to discover and discuss, there's always room for a little friendly competition. If you're not already on Letterboxd, you're missing out on all the fun. And hey, if you upgrade your membership to Pro or Patron, you get some sweet perks like no ads, personalized all-time and annual stats pages, being able to filter your activity feed, and more. If you're a listener of The Next Reel, you can even get a 20% discount when you upgrade, whether you're new or renewing. Just use the code NEXTREEL or head over to thenextreel.com/letterbox to join in on the action. Trust me, the movie watching journey is always a thrilling ride, but it's made even more exciting when you've got a rival to keep you on your toes. So come join the Letterboxd community and find your own friendly nemesis. Who knows? Maybe you'll be the one leaving them in the dust as you blaze through your watch list and drop hot takes on the latest cinema gems.
I'm trying to find my Letterboxd rival and set him on fire. That's funny. Well, sequels and remakes, Andy. This one didn't get very far.
No, I mean, it's fairly recent. It's not like, people have seen this and said, oh my goodness, we have to make the real Niki Lauda story or things like that. But there is a documentary. If you want to get more of the real world of this situation, you can watch Hunt versus Lauda, F1's greatest racing rivals. Have you seen that?
No, I can't believe it.
Yeah, I can't either.
I know. I don't feel good about it. Yeah. Stop judging. Jesus.
Well, I look forward to your review of it to see exactly how it stands out. If you get a better sense of their rivalry than from this.
Yeah, it's on the watch list.
All right.
How to Do It award season.
This film had 6 wins with 66 other nominations. Nice little 666 there. Over at the Saturn Awards, sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, they've definitely branched out into just genre films in general, and we certainly have that here, as it was nominated for Best Action Adventure Film, but lost to Fast and Furious 6. It was nominated for Best Editing, but lost to Gravity, Best Makeup, but lost to Prisoners, and Best Supporting Actor. Again, this is that thing, actor versus supporting actor. Daniel Brühl, he ended up getting a lot of supporting actor nominations, and here he lost to Ben Kingsley in Iron Man 3. Over at the BAFTAs, it did win Best Editing.
You didn't even stop for a laugh break on that?
Sorry,
Ben Kingsley in Iron Man 3? Are you kidding? I mean, it's appropriate that Howard lost to Fast and the Furious because he was trying to make a Fast and the Furious movie and failed.
I would say he wasn't even trying that, but yeah. I don't think he really cared that it was about car racing, but
fair.
Over at the BAFTAs, it won for Best Editing, lost Best Sound to Gravity. Again, Brühl was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but lost to Barkhad Abdi and Captain Phillips. And it was nominated for the Alexander Korda Award for Best British Film, but lost to Gravity. And, this is that frustrating world of film financing. Gravity and Rush are both considered British films. Come on, people. Like, seriously.
Oh, my God.
At the SAG Awards, again, Daniel Brühl nominated for Best Supporting Actor, lost to Jared Leto in Dallas Buyers Club, and it was nominated for Best Action Performance by a Stunt Ensemble, but lost to Lone Survivor. I was trying to do a count. There were, I think Daniel Brühl ended up with 18 nominations, and more than half of those, like 12 of them, were supporting actor. And some of the other ones were like, Best German Actor by one of the German things, and Best Newcomer, and some weird things. But I think only 3 of them were Best Actor. And, of course, Chris Hemsworth got none.
Yeah. Well, he's doing fine.
He's doing just fine.
All right. How to do at the box office. Did Howard get any money?
Yeah, he had a budget of $38 million, or $51.7 million in today's dollars, for his period Formula One film. The movie opened September 2nd, 2013 in London, and then a limited release on 5 screens September 20th in the US, opposite Prisoners, Battle of the Year, the 3D IMAX re-release of The Wizard of Oz. And it would expand the following week, jumping to number 3 in the box office, where it would stay in the top 10 for 2 more weeks. The movie went on to earn $26.9 million domestically and $71.2 million internationally, for a total gross of $133.5 million in today's dollars. That lands the film with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $665,000, making a decent profit.
Okay. I mean, it's flashy. It looks good on a big screen.
Did you see this one in the theater when it came out?
No.
Okay, so had you seen it before watching it? You had seen it. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think I was as angry the first time I saw it. I've since really gotten more into F1, and So now I realize that all of my frustrations were, retroactively justified.
Yeah.
The voiceover, man, the moment it starts, I'm like, this is going to be a long slog.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. It was very mediocre. Is kind of where I landed with this one. I'm like, all right, there it is. So, all right. Well, we will be right back for our ratings, but first, here's the trailer for next week's movie: James Mangold's 2019 film Ford v Ferrari.
It's about time.
If you had asked me at the start of this season which race that Ford v Ferrari was about, I never would have been able to tell you that it was Le Mans. I would have just assumed it was just like a Grand Prix or one of these other things. Like, I don't know which one is which.
Look at your horizons. Are so broad now. Just so broad.
I will probably forget if you ask me in a year.
No way. It's cemented. You're a fan now. You don't know it yet, but
am I?
Great. I can't wait. I'm going to see you in real time over a weekend. And I think it might be, no, it's not going to be during the season. We'll watch old races together. That's what we're going to do. I'm excited.
I will do everything in my power to make sure that we don't do that.
We're going to actually watch this race. We're going to watch this race in Japan.
Over my face while I'm sleeping to see if I can absorb it. That's the only way.
You have no idea the lengths I will go. It's going to be ugly for you.
Oh my gosh.
We're just going to Clockwork Orange it. We're just going to go all the way.
That's one way to really get somebody to fall in love with the sport.
That's right. Force. All right. Should I do an ad?
Yeah, do your ad.
Look, let's not kid ourselves. If you're here listening to a full podcast about Rush, a biopic about Formula One drivers from the 1970s, you're already one of us. You care about the cinematography. You have opinions about Ron Howard's choices. You maybe even know what Nürburgring means without having to look it up. So if you're already that far in, why not go all the way? Become a member of the Next Reel family of film podcasts. Members get periodic bonus episodes, early access, extra in-episode content we don't release publicly, ad-free versions of select shows, access to our live stream recordings, and special channels in our Discord community where we talk about everything from movies to, yes, obscure F1 trivia. You'll also get your own personal podcast feed so you can listen to it all in one place, like a real grown-up person. It's $5 a month or $55 a year, and it directly supports the shows you listen to here at True Story and the film podcasts of The Next Reel. No sponsors, no ads for meal kits we don't use, just us making stuff for people who actually care about film. Head to truestory.fm/join and sign up today. You're already in the pit lane. Vroom, vroom. Let's get you on the track. You can cut that last part.
Vroom, vroom, baby.
Vroom, vroom.
Yeah. A few things that I forgot to mention about the show. They're very short. But one, new fear unlocked, having to have my lungs vacuumed.
Oh.
Good God.
Yeah.
No thanks. Jeez,
I love it when he says, you know what the worst thing was about my recovery? Having my lungs vacuumed. And I was like, I think everyone watching could have answered that for you, Niki. That's the most obvious thing you could say.
Good God, that was awful. And the other thing was, this is the second of our racing films that ends with one of them flipping the other off in a friendly way. And I'm like, is this a racing thing? Like, this is how rivals are. Yeah, friendly flip.
I'm going to start flipping you off at the end of every podcast. We should just gonna make that a thing.
Or no, I guess whoever flips, the other one just has to nod and smile.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
First to flip, FTF. You had other things, though. Was it just those two? Okay.
Yeah, just a couple things, yeah.
Now we have to do Letterboxd.
Yes.
Letterboxd Andrew. That's what we're doing now. True. The next what is our URL? Letterboxd.com/the next reel. That's where you'll find our HQ page. And we would love to see how you apportion your hearts and stars to this movie. Andy, what are you going to do?
I mean, it's not as hard a watch for me as Le Mans was, which just really felt like it was never going to end. And but it felt so generic and like disconnected from the characters because it was trying to make everyone our hero. I feel like this is kind of one of those like straight up the line sorts of like 2.5 no heart sort of movies for me. Like that's I think where I'm going to sit with this one.
I struggle with this because it's no heart. I know that I'm not giving the movie a heart, but is it 2 stars and a heart, 3 stars and a heart? I think it's probably going to land at 3 stars and no heart. And that 3 stars is mostly because of how I felt about Daniel Brühl. I think he did a fantastic job just portraying this character and elevating otherwise some pretty banal content.
He was great. It was hard to get past his fake teeth, but he was great otherwise.
Yeah.
Well, that averages out to 2.75 stars over on our account on Letterboxd, which we'll round up to 3 stars and no heart. Don't forget, you can visit thenextreel.com/ Did we rewrite this end?
I didn't do anything.
This is maybe it's just because I have it in my head and I'm suddenly looking at it and it just totally threw me. Like, why am I looking at our notes? Because I didn't even remember last time I read that.
Yada yada yada.
Okay. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, that averages out to 3 stars and no heart. That's over on our account on Letterboxd at The Next Reel. You can find me there at Soda Creek Film. You can find Pete there at Pete Wright. So what did you think about Rush? We would love to hear your thoughts on this one. Hop into the Show Talk channel over at our Discord community where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
Okay, I'm gonna read a review. I'm gonna go first, and it's gonna include words that don't make any sense to you, but it makes me smile. So I'll get it out of the way, and you can laugh and nod if you want, just to acknowledge that I exist.
I
but
know
you don't have to.
You just found a movie written by a real race fan, so this is going to be exciting.
This is Bree, who writes 5 stars and a heart. I am going to be the most psychotic person on the planet when they make one of these about Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. Andy, I'm so down with Bree. So down. That's all. We don't need to litigate it. You just need to know review? I read it. That's it. Oh. That was the whole thing.
Okay. I was expecting more race stuff, but
nope.
Still,
that was
5 stars and that's I don't understand that.
Nope, doesn't matter.
Nodding and smiling.
Nod and smile. That's your job. You had one job. All right. What's yours?
I went low. I went 1/2 star by Leanna. A film about Formula One racing that I'd describe as a high-speed chase to boredom. If you think watching F1 is thrilling, you'll love this race for the finish line of mediocrity.
Brilliant. Finish line of mediocrity. Please. Thanks, Letterboxd.